Pop culture pastor.
So the beautiful thing about pop culture, about movies, TV, comic books, music, is at its best, it connects us and it draws us closer to each other. At its worst, it probably can isolate us in our fixation, if you will, of it being an idol. But I think for the most part, uh, pop culture has been very beneficial for me in that connectivity, making friends, starting new relationships with people. And it really takes off for me when I am a junior in college. I go to Kansas Wesleyan University, and while at Kansas Wesleyan University, I make some amazing friends. And some of that is through my love of pop culture, and one of those amazing friends is on the show tonight. His name is Scotty Walker.
Hi, guys.
Welcome, Scotty. So this is Pop Culture Pastor. Uh, I'm Cody. Dave is a little under the weather, so we are doing this a little different. We're going straight to the geek phone without even mentioning going to the geek phone. And we are joined by fellow geek of the round table, Scotty Walker.
I'm
So
glad to be here.
glad you are here, because this would be an awkward show without you.
I'll try to make it less awkward then.
That's what friends are for.
Exactly.
So, Scotty, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Do you like Michael Jackson's music?
I do. I do.
What's your favorite Michael Jackson song?
Favorite Michael Jackson? Probably Smooth Criminal.
Ooh, so that one's a classic. And I struggle with whether I like the original, which is Michael's,
Yeah,
or if I like Alien Ant Farms better.
it's a good update.
It is. It's fun. Um, so with all this random Michael Jackson questions, you're probably wondering, what are you talking about, Cody? Well, let me tell you. So over the weekend, it was posted on Twitter from Kurko. That's a Twitter handle that tracks music leaks, that 50 gigabytes of unreleased Michael Jackson content, including unreleased songs and demos, were leaked after a laptop and hard drive belonging to Michael Jackson's engineer, Brad Sundberg, was stolen.
Ooh,
And it was stolen from a seminar. Now, how much music do you think that is? 50 gigs seems like a lot.
that's a ton. And as much as that sounds huge, there's probably, I would say, two, three times that still out there that's saying they're never been released either. You
Well,
know,
that's a good thing.
Exactly. I know when Prince passed away, they said when they went into the house, he kept everything there. Like nobody else could handle any of his stuff. They said when they went in, there was enough music that they could release probably for the next 20 some odd years in a vault. So I imagine Michael's the same way.
I would imagine so. I mean, that's insane. 20 years worth of music, and from those minds, like, it's going to be good quality stuff.
Yeah.
So Sundberg, who was like I said, an engineer, uh he was at a seminar and was presenting, and someone broke in to where his laptop was and hard drive, grabbed it, fled to the roof, and jumped off the building.
That sounds like an action movie sequence.
Oh yeah, this has to be made into like a real life like movie autobiography movie about this guy, whoever he is, that just ran off and stole 50 gigs of Michael Jackson unreleased music.
Yeah.
Oh, that I mean, I don't know how you do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And evidently got away because all that music is now on the internet somewhere.
In the dark web.
Yes. And I avoid the dark web, so
Yeah. That's probably a good place to stay away from.
I will probably never get to hear this unless it's released in like bulk on Apple Music or something.
Yeah. Maybe that opens the door for that stuff. If they think it's out there, they may go ahead and say, hey, it's out there. We might as well release it.
That's a good point. Kind of
Yeah.
force their hand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think if this one never happened, it probably wouldn't ever been heard of or known of. So maybe we get new Michael music,
I honestly had not considered like that possibility, but I imagine that there will be new music released like upon certain anniversaries.
Yeah.
And so, or unreleased demos or cuts of previous hits. And so that does seem to be a thing with celebrities that have passed away, that, oh, it's the 5th anniversary. Here's this. And so on and so forth. Because, I mean, literally, like the 40th anniversary of Elvis's death, they released new music. And I'm like, he's been dead for 40 years. How's this happening?
Yeah. The big question in the room is, do we ever get to hear the Freddie Mercury and all this stuff, or Freddie Mercury and Michael stuff?
Ooh.
That would, we've never heard that stuff either. Neither of them could come to terms while alive that it always sat there and never got out.
Now you're making my mind blow. But we're going to go on from this news topic before you like make me like incapacitated with just these random knowledge bombs being dropped left and right. So that Discovery and Warner Brothers combined not too long ago, and for better or for worse, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Very well aware, because major shakeups were happening, and HBO Max like got rid of a whole bunch of content.
Yeah.
And with that being said, it is happening to other streaming services now as well. So Paramount Plus is combining with Showtime.
Yeah.
And as of yesterday, we're recording the night before this pod's supposed to be released. Paramount has pulled quite a bit of original content, and that includes Jordan Peele's Twilight Zone.
I did see that. It's an interesting move, but I've talked about this before with a lot of people, and we're at that point where that when we started, it was Netflix had the market.
They did.
The moment that everybody started having their own thing, there had to be a moment where that bubble burst. And I think we're at that point of, now there becomes this fight over, who has what IP. You have Disney controlling a huge amount between everything they own and what 20th Century Fox owned when they bought 20th Century Fox. And now they have this partnership with Sony, which, leads to the new deal for Doctor Who from BBC. So it's, I think that we're at that point, that you unless you're solely, say, like Paramount themselves is producing a show by themselves, which is costly, they're not going to be able to keep a hold of these things because everybody else has went the same route and have picked up these things. So,
and that is some good perspective, which I am excited about Doctor Who being on Disney Plus, because I have been so long without BBC. And so it's time to get caught up on all that. But the thing that kind of bothers me with some of this, especially within the HBO Max purging and the Paramount Plus Showtime purging that's happening as we're doing this podcast, is that in my mind, like, you own the Twilight Zone. Why are you making it so I can't watch it legally on your streaming service? It's bothersome. Like, you guys can store all this in the cloud, and the cloud is infinite, and everything should be available just instantly, I feel.
yeah. But the way I understand it, and this is, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right. Jordan Peele has a deal with somebody else, though.
Oh, now
So,
that would complicate things.
see, and that would be that's the problem, that he had done this and then moved on to whoever he's with now, and so now it becomes this, moving the pieces of like, we own this piece, but you own this piece now. So that's and see, that's what I kind of, was kind of the shocking thing when HBO Max did that. But when you go back and look at all those pieces, they were things that weren't solely, funded by Warner Brothers. They were funded by other corporations, other production companies, produced by other people. So then it became, those people have deals other places. So like I said, it comes back to, unless you're doing it all on your own and funding it, which is hugely costly, especially for a show.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, you look at something, anything from like the Disney Plus range, all those, if you're trying to live up to that production value, that's a lot of money, you know. So
That is a lot of money. And so when I was reading the article that was on Yahoo from Cinema Blend, they didn't go into much detail about Jordan Peele having outside deals. They just really focused on, well, when these streaming services combine, some shows go away, some shows get the axe instantly. Like with HBO, Westworld was instantly stopped, and a lot of the DC stuff like Teen Titan or the Titan show and Doom Patrol was axed. And so, like, in my mind, I thought maybe what they're doing with some of this material that's disappearing from the streaming site was they're trying to be like McDonald's with the McRib, that, oh, we're going to take it away, but it'll come back for a little bit. So binge watch then.
and that may be an option, maybe at some point it becomes a rotating thing that they spend the money that they have it every so often, and then they don't spend as much to keep it around.
Yeah.
And you look at some of those things, especially like HBO, there's still a bunch of stuff that Warner Brothers does not want to pay for. Like the 66 Batman show is still not on streaming.
Mm.
Because the thing is, for many, many years with that show, they couldn't put it on home video, and that lasted through VHS and DVD, because the problem was they had to go back to everybody's estate that was in that show, including all those cameos in the windows when Batman and Robin climbed up. They have to go to all those estates. Warner Brothers did not want to pay for that. And then they also, and this is the most disturbing in the situation, they had not fully paid off for the Batmobile either. So,
What?
yeah, for many years they had not paid Barris for the Batmobile. So you had the show that was hugely popular, that was still hugely popular by the time it was canceled, and couldn't be seen anywhere besides in syndication because nobody wanted to pay for home video release. And it wasn't until here probably 10, 15 years ago that they finally did those first DVD sets. Well, then streaming happened, and then, with streaming, it's a whole other ballgame. You have to go back and renegotiate those deals again. So yeah, it's crazy to think, but yeah,
We're never
something
getting Adam West Batman.
you know, I hope at some point they'll finally find a way to do it, but I don't know, you know, and a funny story and that with that as well is that when it ended, it wasn't supposed to end. ABC had made an offer to pick it back up, but CBS had already destroyed all the sets. So they're like, we're not spending money to rebuild all the sets, so it didn't go on.
Oh,
If they would have went on, here's the big trivia of the week. Clint Eastwood would have been Two-Face in the next season.
what?
Yeah,
No way.
yeah,
Oh my goodness. Okay, like wow. Wow. That's a game changer.
yeah,
Oh, I, you have the good, the bad, and the ugly Clint Eastwood as Two-Face,
yeah.
which would really work well. Oh man, we missed out.
We did.
So I got one last news piece before we get to a new segment that we're going to introduce. But I think it will lead us there. And so, Scotty, do you read autobiographies?
I do.
What's one of your favorite autobiographies, Scotty?
Um, I really like Tom Baker's autobiography, who is the doctor. His is really good. I don't think who else. I luckily got to read Elizabeth Sladen's that she wrote before she passed away. Those are high on my list. Ones I venture back to.
Those are some good quality ones. And so how does it feel when you read about someone's life from their perspective, compared to what you have seen and witnessed through TV?
I think it's fun to see, especially somebody like, Elizabeth Sladen, who you always kind of identified with as playing, Sarah Jane and Doctor Who, but knowing, what it took for her to get that role, and even after that role, how she continued her career. We didn't see much of her till the relaunch of Doctor, so it was kind of nice to know those years. And somebody like Tom Baker, you find out that he was a normal guy, was in the military and all these things, and was a soldier during World War II.
Now, was he a construction worker?
He was actually still working when he got the job.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, had to go back to work until BBC actually announced it. All the guys
Well,
on the construction site used to think he was lying about being an actor and used to call him Lancelot.
those are the things you love and you learn when you read, kids. So read all the books. But have I got a new autobiography for you, Scotty? Okay, so this one is from a loving father, protector, avenger, best-selling author, Scott Lang. Look out for the little guy, is actually being released as a book.
sounds
So
sounds good to me. Let's get this.
so what was originally just like something that was kind of a subplot within like a Miss Marvel episode. Scott Lang's doing a book tour,
Yeah,
and Disney Marvel is actually releasing the book. Paul Rudd introduced it that he did not write this book, or he's sure he didn't write this book, and that this book could possibly change your life. Possibly. He couldn't guarantee it because there's a whole bunch of legal issues if you guarantee things.
yeah.
But it's available for pre-order right now on Amazon, in hardback and in the ebook Kindle version. Currently, where it sits on their list of biographies is number 7, right behind Prince Harry's Spare autobiography.
That's pretty respectable there.
That is. And so evidently it's supposed to have a lot of background information and stories about Scott Lang. So if you were aching for more Scott Lang, I guess you could actually buy this book.
Yeah, for sure.
And like if someone is wanting to buy me the book, I will not turn it down. That's all I'm going to say. Because like it's combining two of my favorite genres and biographies and graphic novel characters.
Yeah.
And so this could be the Miley Cyrus or the best of both worlds of books. So just an FYI. Scotty, do you have any thoughts about this?
I think it's a fun kind of tie-in. That are always pushing, our books and things like that to go with these movies, but it's kind of fun that you're doing something that you haven't really touched and played with. You have these things. Something that would be cool is, you always hear, the Thor movies, Avengers movies about Selvig, writing,
Yes.
you know, it's interesting to me that it took this long for someone to be like, we can do this. It didn't do it with him, but I think it fun, and I think it plays into the character of Scott Lang quite a bit. That tongue in cheek of who he is, for sure.
And that leads us to a new segment that we will fully dive into after the break, the Comic Conclave. And so stay tuned. We will be right back. Welcome back to Pop Culture Pastor. We are still on the Geek Phone with Scotty Walker, and we have a brand new segment that we're going to do quite frequently, I believe, and it is the Comic Conclave. And today, or this pod, we are diving into Kingdom Come. Scotty, tell us about Kingdom Come.
Kingdom Come is a great DC story with the great artist Alex Ross. He had just come off of doing the Marvels at Marvel and felt like that he wanted to do the same thing for the characters that he grew up with and loved. So that was Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Captain Marvel, or Shazam as we call him now.
Yeah.
And wanted to kind of reflect on what kind of comics had become, in those years. They kind of missed that old school heroic, sensibility. So he tells a story about how those heroes have kind of disappeared, in the same way that, in the 90s, they kind of lost sight and got lost as well. So through the story of, which at the heart of it is about losing faith and also trying to find hope in those little moments, is a story about those heroes coming back. And it starts with a pastor who is leading his own congregation, but is kind of himself also kind of lost faith in the world around him, and is setting with a man called Dobbs, who is Sandman, not Morpheus, but a Sandman within the DC universe.
Okay.
And Dobbs keeps telling me he's having these visions of an apocalypse that's coming that will be led by the superheroes of the metas. So when Dobbs passes away, he passes those visions to our pastor, and this pastor then starts to see these things and is also visited by the Spectre, who is a vigilante character who passes judgment on people like judge, jury, and executioner. So through these pastors' eyes, we see the world heading towards that apocalypse. So we see Wonder Woman, who kind of got the brunt of the bad side of, disappearing from the world. She tried to go back home to Themyscira and was pretty much denounced of being a princess because she had failed her mission. So she has come to Superman, who through that conversation we find out that he left being a hero because the new uprising of these more vigilante, more rogue heroes who had no qualms about killing have come forward, and the leader of that group is Magog, and Magog had actually killed the Joker, who was on trial for killing all the Daily Planet staff, including Lois Lane, Perry White, and Jimmy Olsen. So Wonder Woman kind of becomes a catalyst of trying to get those pieces back together. While this is happening, Lex and the cabal of villains, including Batman and Talia al Ghul's son, are trying to use Magog to their favor to try and show that the heroes are not worth being here as well, which leads to all kinds of great and bad things of, you know, being the catalyst to the big third act of that, you know, once Superman's come forward, it kind of becomes an even bigger fight. So much so that Lex himself thinks that has a secret weapon in using Captain Marvel. He's brainwashed him to use him on his side. And the way he's brainwashed him has pretty much left Billy inside of Shazam's body, dying even, which is rough.
Oh, yeah,
So,
not good.
not good. So he sends Shazam then to go pretty much hit the Gulag prison, which houses all the supervillains that are still out and about. And while this is happening, Superman's finally emerged, coming back to be the hero, you know, the true Justice American way that we know him as, and pretty much denounced all these new heroes that come forward. With him coming forward, it's brought back, you know, Flash, it's brought back Green Lantern. He tries to get Bruce to come back, but Bruce, you know, set in his own ways.
Bruce is a cranky old man.
Bruce is a cranky old man who's set in his ways, and he kept fighting, whereas everybody else kind of turned their back. So he's kind of jaded.
Very jaded.
But what Clark doesn't know is that he is working with Lex, but actually not working with Lex. He has infiltrated it with his son on the board, trying to figure out what they were doing so he can do it and bring him down himself. So it's also, you know, so we have all these central characters. You know, we have the pastor who's lost faith. We have Superman in a certain degree who has lost his faith in the world and the heroes around him. You have Wonder Woman who is the same way. And you have Bruce who, you know, feels like he's alone, jaded again, but still fighting to find that bit of hope. And that's always been the thing about this story that's always spoke to me, was that you have these characters who, in a sense, are gods.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that even they can lose hope and lose faith in the world around them. You know, but it takes one spark, no matter how big it is or how small it is, to change the tide and to be a voice of change. You know, so through all these pieces moving, you know, including Bruce working behind the scenes and Clark, you know, coming out to be that symbol again of justice. You know, the villains have pushed in and broken into this prison. So once this fight begins, the government decides it's time to be done with this. With a little pushing from Lex and the cabal of villains, they decide to launch nukes. And when they launch these nukes, it's, you know, it's that moment of that it's not, Clark has still not lost faith, even in the face of going against Shazam, who's being brainwashed. He still has that hope. He still has that, I'm surrounded by Wonder Woman, I'm surrounded by Green Lantern, I'm surrounded by Blue Beetle, I'm surrounded by all these characters, all these heroes, that no matter what we do, we can do this. And
Yeah.
you know, so he finds that hope again, which, you know, leads to, you know, finally getting through to Billy, and Billy sacrificing himself to stop the nukes. And which is a powerful moment, kind of that, you know, yes, this was Alex Ross's point was that it was trying to find that way to bring back the golden age comics, pretty much. But there still has to be sacrifices, and even those sacrifices can lead to great moments of hope. So by the end of the story, we see our pastor, who is finally has told pretty much the Spectre that he does see that there's still hope, and that no one should be punished for the things they've done. That we all lose hope and lose faith at some point, even to the point that the pastor goes back to having a new congregation and preaching about hope and faith, and a great moment in that what used to be the final panels of the comic. You see Spectre in his human persona setting as part of the congregation, that he even won over the Spectre, and for many years that's where it ended. It wasn't until it hit graphic novel that we have the epilogue that is added, where you find out that Wonder Woman is pregnant and they want Bruce to be the godfather. That wasn't added after the issues were put out, which yet again is that, even no matter how many squabbling and how many back and forth Clark and Bruce have, that at the end of the day, if he still has hope in what Bruce is doing, and Bruce has faith in what Clark is doing, that so much so that they're willing to have him be the godfather of their child.
So I actually have read this graphic novel within the past couple of years. So Dave owns it, and he lent it to me. It was right before I started my master's program. And so it's been about a solid 2 years ago. And oh my goodness, there's so many layers to this, like you have described, that on kind of that surface level of comic bookdom, I guess, if you will, at this moment, anti-heroes are what's happening.
Yeah.
The golden age of superheroes has come and gone, and I mean, Batman can survive through it because he himself tends to kind of operate as a vigilante anti-hero character.
It works in that gray area.
Yeah. And so he still can thrive and survive, but some of those more beloved characters kind of take a hit during this time.
Yeah.
And so bringing them back and making a story where they're outcast and that they're all by themselves and struggling for survival, and at the end conquer, is a beautiful thing. But then the faith imagery throughout this book will preach, as I will word it. The pastor, who his name is Norman McKay, like through his eyes, he's getting told or shown what's happening by Spectre, and as you're seeing it through his eyes and seeing how he's viewed the world, which is in a more negative light, he's lost hope in humanity. He doesn't even know why he's preaching anymore. And by the end of it, like you said, just a little spark can change and refuel people and give them hope. And so he has hope and faith in humanity again, even though it's because of what superheroes have done. But Jesus talks about no greater love has a man than the one who lays down his life for a friend. And all the heroes, including Billy, by the time that he's able to get out of that trance, is willing to do that.
Yeah.
And so, phenomenal story. If you haven't read it, Scotty didn't spoil a whole lot of it.
No.
Like, there's so much that happens, and it's
There's
not a huge graphic novel by any stretch of the imagination. yes, if you haven't read it, I probably should have said spoiler alert at the very beginning, but definitely check that out. Do you have anything else that you want to add to this breakdown of Kingdom Come?
It's one of those books that also like you don't have to read anything else. Like you know Superman, you know Batman, you know Wonder Woman, you know those characters. It is there's no pre stories that you need to get through to get to this, which leaves it open for a lot of anybody to come into. I think that's kind of the beauty of it as well. He did the same thing with the Marvels at Marvel, but I think there's just something about Kingdom Come that speaks even more than the Marvels did for me. And you know, and then that his beautiful artwork is just phenomenal. You know, I've got many art books by him, and seeing him go from live models in those costumes, the head sculpts, to paint those characters is just phenomenal. How he works, you know, it always seeing his work always for me is, you know, I'm an artist myself, but I look up to him. I'm like, I'll never paint that way, but uh, it's it's amazing to see his work. And then the, you know, knowing that he, you know, had most of that concept on his own until they brought somebody else in to help break it out in issues, is phenomenal as well. That, you know, the that love of the golden age, you know, Billy and Shazam at that point was pretty much forgotten. Like that
Mm-hmm.
character, you know, DC had gotten the licensing for that character after the lawsuit for with Fawcett, but really hadn't done anything with him. So it was kind of that, you know, characters that had been totally forgotten. You know, even the Spectre had kind of disappeared into the ether of not being around either. You know, and it was it's kind of nice to see that love of that golden age that, you know, was there. But then like we both said, that also that here we are into a different time frame of comics, because at this point you'd had the rise of characters like Spawn and characters like that that had pretty much was dominating the markets. You know, it would, you know, we'd kind of lost that old good old boy, the big blue boy scout Superman, you know, the true justice American way, and it kind of led the way to these more violent, more I don't want to say chaotic, but anti-hero characters that, you know, had kind of lost that, I don't say moral ground, but had, in a sense.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's nice to find, you know, it's always refreshing every time I read it, going back and reading that. You know, we've seen it in more recent years yet again, that, you know, we see that kind of cycle of, you know, everyone always tries to reinvent the wheel, to say, but it always comes back to that, you know, that kind of golden age feel, and that's what really works for those characters.
Good story selection. I am glad that we got to talk about this on this week's episode, because it is going to lead into tonight's main topic, which is the DCU. And next week, Scotty will introduce another story, and we'll have some time to prep and talk about it and read it, and then we'll discuss it again.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. We will be back with tonight's main topic. Welcome back to Pop Culture Pastor. We are in our main subject of this pod, which this pod's been heavy with comic book books and movies. And so this week, finally, we've been waiting the whole month of January for DC to announce their DCU Stage 1 plans, which it is titled Gods and Monsters. And they identified that some things that already exist, like Todd Phillips' Joker and Matt Reeves, the Batman, they're Elseworld stories that they're not connected. Don't worry about them in the storytelling of this, but watch the new stuff that comes out. And they break down, oh, when I say they, I mean James Gunn breaks down what the projects are, and he identifies that this isn't everything that's going to be in chapter one, but this is some of the stuff to look forward to. But before we dive into that, Scotty, I have to know, what is your feelings about the old guard, if you will, the DCEU, um, where it left off, and this transition of power to James Gunn and Peter Safran? Like, I know it's a lot, but how did you feel about the DCEU before it became the DCU?
I'm a big fan of that stuff. I think there's a place for it, and I think there's still a place for it. I've said this, and everyone who listens to me have heard me say this quite often. I feel like no matter what you felt like about Zack Snyder, that there was three big things. Gal Gadot was Wonder Woman, Henry Cavill was Superman, and Ben Affleck was Batman. That was our trendy within that world. Um, I do agree that there has been some shakiness within there. I feel, it's interesting to me that, it was Gunn coming forward to begin with and saying, "Hey, we're keeping the things that work and the things that we didn't work," and then we right out of the gate are like, "But Henry Cavill's not coming back." And then it was Ben Affleck is done after the Flash and after Aquaman. Maybe now we're hearing maybe he may or may not be an Aquaman too. And then it was, we got the news that Patty Jenkins' third Wonder Woman was moving forward, and it sounded like Gal Gadot was done, which sounds like now the door's still open for Gal, but
Yeah, I
maybe
know,
not.
like, there was kind of double-sided speak with the whole Wonder Woman stuff.
Yeah,
That, like, according to James and Peter, they pitched their vision and Patty didn't see herself in that vision. And then but Gal's still welcome. And then it sounded like from Patty's camp that nope, it's all over.
yeah. And that's and not just from Patty's, but everybody that's not involved within Warner Brothers. It was out of the gate. James was talking about you know the four movies we're getting this year still matter. The weeks leading up, we've heard otherwise. So I don't know if it's, hey, we've got these four movies that each one is upwards of $200 million that we spent on, that we don't lose this money. So we're not going to say that Zachary Levi is done as Shazam. We're not going to say Jason Momoa is done as Aquaman. We're not going to say that Gal is done because she's supposed to be in Shazam 2. I don't know if it's just kind of save face or what the case is. I know there's been a lot of talk that that Zack Snyder's wife had pitched that they would cover the bills if they could go somewhere else and use these characters to finish what he was doing. You know, I
Mm.
I, I think if you are Warner Brothers, who at the end of the day is trying to pull yourself out of the red, you know, and James Gunn's first few announcements here, even this week's stuff hasn't been hit with unison of people overjoyed about it. I feel like, sadly, I feel like, the stuff that he announced this week really didn't, win people over. I think it, kind of still felt like, salt in the wounds a little bit yet, even to the point that he talked about why Henry was not involved anymore. And it felt kind of like a backhanded and kind of like, well, he wasn't who I wanted. So, his exact words was, he was never hired, so he was never fired.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, really? Like, I don't know if that was the right statement to make about that situation.
I mean, all this stuff leading up to this week's announcement about the slate of movies, TV shows, and um gaming, um it's just been bananas to follow.
Yeah.
um for me, like, so I kind of wish Dave was on this podcast just because he is kind of a DC cynic, if you will. And so I know that he despised at times the DCEU, just because there were things that he held sacred with some of the characters, and I'll use Man of Steel as an example. He loves the first like 2/3 of the movie. It's once Superman and Zod destroy like
That's it.
every building ever, and then Superman breaks the one rule he has. It's like you went too hardcore too fast. Like,
But that moment, and I've debated this moment with many people over the years. I feel like that moment for me was the first time that we gave him the setup for why he doesn't break that rule.
oh yeah.
Nobody
Eh,
had really ever really went there, and something for me with Man of Steel, that I'm a huge Superman guy. Anybody knows me knows that my DC character. Um, Everybody always focuses on Kal-El becoming Superman. The
mhm.
thing is, he is already Superman the moment he is born on Krypton and comes to Earth. The thing that Zach did that a lot of people, even in comics, don't a lot of times cue to, is that that journey is about him finding Clark and finding his humanity.
Oh yeah. And so I agree with Dave. Like the first 2/3 of it might be the best Superman we get
Yeah.
out of all the Supermen that's come on screen, just because you do get that Clark development, that he's more humanistic, he's
Yeah.
relatable, versus the Superman, I'm indestructible except everyone their mom has kryptonite underwear evidently. And so, like, for me, I did enjoy the DCU projects. There were some that I'm like, oh, this could have been done better, or I would have made different story choices. It really falls apart when Snyder has to step away from Justice League.
But I think I rewind a little further than that even. I think the falling apart becomes a moment that Man of Steel comes out, and they start testing BVS.
Oh yeah.
You start making those cuts in the BVS, which yet again, we talk about those Clark centric, moments of finding that humanity, and the story of the through line through his trilogy was supposed to be, which was not supposed to be a trilogy. It was supposed to be 8 movies, each one leading to that Justice League movie, was supposed to be that Clark was that through line. When Warner Bros. Came in and stuck their hands in and started chopping on BVS, and you lose 90% of those Clark moments, I felt like that was kind of the first indication of you had a director who, for better or for worse, did have a plan and had a through line and had this grand plan that you wanted to be like Marvel, which I always say, it's apples to oranges with Marvel and DC.
Yes.
You can't make that comparison, but I think Snyder had the best idea for that world, that we can make these interlock. And then you come off of BBS then, and the same thing happens to David Ayers with Suicide Squad. You had a movie that third act was not supposed to be it was supposed to be CGI still, but it wasn't supposed to be this random character that you had made up for to be Enchantress's brother. It was supposed to be Steppenwolf there. It was supposed to be the leading to Justice League then, and you weren't supposed to have these mindless horde. It was parademons,
Mhm.
so I felt like, even before we get to the tragedy that happens with Zach, you know, and he has to step away from Justice League, they were already there, and there's only one person to blame, and it's that old regime, and we can't go back now to change that. But I think there is a point, because James Gunn makes this very apparent many times with that video that DC is still a multiverse.
It
You
is.
have you have these opportunities that you could continue, designate an Earth that this is where the Snyder stuff is happening. Designate an Earth where if we are going to go forward with Michael Keaton's Batman, where that stuff is happening, and delve into that stuff, play into that stuff, because at the end of the day, you have one of the couple of the biggest multi-dimensional stories you can play with within like Crisis on Infinite Earths. You have I know that some of this Flash movie supposedly supposed to be Flashpoint, but yet
Mm-hmm.
you have these alternate world stories that you could build to any one to be your big end of your first big go round. You don't need a big villain like Marvel did with Thanos. You could build to the big event.
Yeah.
I really think that, and then, if you do Crisis on Infinite Earths, that's when you bring back Henry. You have all these multiple Superman, all these multiple Batmans. You have this opportunity. I don't know if throwing away all these things were the right way to go.
Yeah.
I know, varying quality with the CW stuff, but those things really did work for many, many people, maybe not
Yeah.
for everybody, but, like I said, through the years it's been up and down. But, yet again, those shows, the last big crossover for those shows already kind of set up the multiple Earth thing. Even to the point where you got Ezra's Flash to be in there with Grant Gustin's Flash. So I think you had a way to go and keep going that I don't think you had to be as grandiose about rebooting as I think we're heading towards.
So for me, I agree that like those CW shows, especially the first 4 or 5 seasons of each one, really work well.
Yeah.
Now, after a while, they kind of run their course, I feel.
Yeah.
But like you said, they've talked about that there's uh multiple Earths, multiverse stuff happening. Um, like so with DC, EU, and DCU, like the leadership that made the final choices that was above Zack Snyder. I mean, a lot of poor choices throughout.
Yeah.
And it leads to a point where like it's basically the Wild West, and who can last the longest gets to be at the helm of the DCU. And for a hot second, it looked like Dwayne the Rock Johnson was going to do a hostile takeover.
Yeah.
And it nearly worked, in which I think that there is a world or a cinematic universe that could have like actually worked kind of well.
Yeah.
But then there's James Gunn and Peter Safran, who Warner Brothers Discovery decides to go with, which they are the force behind James Gunn's Suicide Squad and Peacemaker. And I know that you and I differ on like our feelings about James Gunn being at the helm, just because like for me it brought about a sense of stability, even with all the firings and rumors that were swirling. It's like, okay, I've seen this guy do Guardians 1, 2, and soon 3.
Yeah,
And that Christmas special that was very special to me. And then literally I'm rewatching Peacemaker right now, and this is like my third time through watching
Yeah.
it, and I'm still laughing. I'm still caring about the characters. I'm loving Easter eggs I didn't notice the first 2 times I watched it. And so like this guy knows his stuff.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I Peacemaker is near and dear to my heart, and even his Suicide Squad is near and dear to me, and I'm a Guardians guy as well. I I think there's just some. I think there has to be some iron done. I think if you are rebooting, I don't think you can bring back, you can't Jason come back as Aquaman or Gal as Wonder Woman. I think now if you're going that route, you have to go that route full tilt. The problem is to do that, you can't do the Waller show.
Yes,
Yeah,
because Waller connects to everyone.
yeah. And even so much like the Peacemaker stuff. You had Jason and Ezra in that final shot. Spoilers.
Yes.
So I think I think if you got to pick either we're rebooting this or we're not rebooting this. And supposedly maybe Flash will clear some of that up, but I think if you do bring back some people, but not all people, there is going to be a large number of that fan base that is not okay with that because you have shoved who most see in Henry, the best Superman that's ever been on screen, away. So I do I I do really enjoy James Gunn. Even pre his comic book stuff. We go back to like writing on Dawn of the Dead with Zack Snyder. Even the Scooby Doo movies.
I was going to say Scooby Doo.
I love Slither. It's not for everybody, but I love that movie. So he does have a great mind, and I think something else that really is great about him with the DC stuff so far, what we've seen, is, and some people don't like this, but I do, that willingness to look at characters that doesn't get the looks they should. We're talking about Booster Gold coming, which we'll talk about in a bit, and other characters like that. So I don't know. I think there's also a place where shows like Doom Patrol and Titans could have kept on going, even with what you're doing. I don't think the old adage of, and it was always this thing, even during Smallville, when Smallville was running and Nolan was starting to do his Batman movies, they wouldn't let Smallville use Batman because they didn't want to use multiple Batmans because they thought it would deter people from what's happening on one or the other. And I don't think that's the case. And we see that so much so, and we have Ben Affleck as Batman, and we're seeing the Batman work.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think there's good, and I think there'll be bad. And I think for a while, I think you're going to have to really try and get people back.
Yeah. So I see a few camps right now within the DC fandom. There's a lot of diehard Snyderverse fans. And when they announced Henry Cavill was back, oh, I was back with him.
Exactly.
And then like he really wasn't back, and so now we're all heartbroken about that. But there's also the group that's like, oh, we needed a fresh start. And then there's a lot of us that are like on the edge of, I don't know about this. And we're going to find out about it, especially this year. Like you said, these 4 movies that are coming out this year have been portrayed as still relevant to what's coming out in stage 1. And that the Flash is going to reset everything somehow. And so a movie that I wasn't sure I was going to watch just because of Ezra's off-camera issues that they have been struggling with, that had put a bad taste in my mouth. But it seems like they have gotten help, and that hopefully they are on a better path, and that they are in a better place mentally and physically. So I will be watching, just because, again, I don't know how you reset this and partially reset it. So some of these characters are still relevant, but that's up for James Gunn and Peter Safran and the executives to figure out.
Yeah.
But let's jump into the announcement of shows, movies, and video games. Which, during this announcement, what I thought was really amazing, and this is probably the big thing that I would want Dave on for, is that James Gunn said that we're going to have continuity throughout all the stories. So something might be animated in this one aspect, but it's going to connect to the live action version of this.
Yeah.
And the video games are going to actually uh follow along with where we're at in this universe, and that we're going to keep, if someone plays Superman in live action, they're going to do the voiceover work for the cartoon or animation portion. And he made it sound like all these different medias and or mediums and forums actually are going to be must watch if you're going to keep up with the universe. Where that's kind of been the complaint with Marvel here, is that, oh, I don't need to watch any of these shows because it really hasn't added to the cinematic universe. Even WandaVision, there were complaints that it really didn't set up for Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, although I would argue it. But
I do too.
that's a complaint that is happening. And so for me, that was kind of music to my ears, that this can be basically Marvel's guinea pig, is watching DC do this and see if this is something that it's just too much, or if it actually works.
But if he can pull this off, applause. It's a lofty goal, but at the end of the day, it's something that, even partially Marvel hasn't been able to do. You look at something like What If, you got half of your actors come back to their voice.
Yeah.
That's, so, and even game wise, you've never, it's interesting to me that you want to connect games too. That's the one that's lofty to me. It's interesting because you've got this year alone, and maybe they're not, and I guess they're not counting it, but at some point we're supposed to have Justice League, or the Suicide Squad kills the Justice League.
Ooh.
So I don't feel like that game's gonna connect. So maybe it's after that, but I don't know. It's you've always kind of had that. Even if you go back to like the Rocksteady Arkham games, they kind of connected to the other Batman animated stuff a little bit, but not fully either. So if you can pull this off and get us that direction, that's applause. And I do agree with, what we had said about, Marvel trying to do that with the shows. It seemed like they were be a bigger thing in help, but not fully yet. Like you get into multiverse, and you can pick up on everything that you need in that movie without having, you know, that. But I recommend it because WandaVision was amazing.
Oh yeah.
So, I don't know, and even if, we go around of, the Star Wars stuff is the same way though. You build up these shows that, we're supposed to be interconnected and have, some kind of draw to movies that are coming or movies that have already come, but not so much. I don't feel that so much. And don't get me wrong, I'm a huge Mandalorian guy, but even that I didn't, you don't have a whole lot of connecting, So if Gunn can, rally the wagons and get it done, Kudos.
Yeah, that will be a game changer. So I'm going to read through the list of the 10 projects that have been laid out.
Okay.
And then we'll dive into whatever one you want to go to first.
Okay.
So there is an Amanda Waller show, a Green Lantern show, The Authority, Paradise Lost, which is also going to be a show pre-Wonder Woman, Swamp Thing, Booster Gold, Superman Legacy, Creature Commandos, The Brave and the Bold, and Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. Scotty Walker, where would you like to start?
Let's go with the creatures. Let's go.
Okay.
I think this will be a fun one to talk about. And it sounds like it's the furthest along in production, the way I understand it.
Okay, so tell us about creatures.
Creatures is an interesting choice. Yet again, it's what I talked about, characters that most people don't know. But when you look at that roster, it could be the first kind of connecting. Weasel. So I take it that means Sean Gunn will come back and do Weasel in the animated as well, since
Still getting work.
Still getting work. The other nice thing that'd be fun with that series is to see that we're getting Rick Flag Sr.
Oh,
We've already seen a Rick Flag within Suicide Squad. So
he's gone.
Are we going to announce him as father? Or are we going to announce him as an uncle? In regular comic continuity, he was a father to that Rick Flag version. So it'll be interesting to see what time frame they put the show into, because it would be really interesting to see if you do like a World War I or World War II setting.
Ooh. So this is a 7-episode animated show in which Amanda Waller creates a black ops team out of monstrous prisoners. From what I am reading.
That's Waller always with her hands in.
Oh yeah. Amanda's everywhere somehow. And how do they get Viola Davis to keep coming back? That's my thing. Like, this lady has won Oscars and they're like, we want you to be this mean lady that usually does not have any ounce of humanity in her whatsoever. Can you do this? And will you keep doing it over and over again?
But you can't get much more fun than playing Waller, any medium.
So yeah, James Gunn has written all the episodes for the first season. So yes, it's ready, which oh my goodness, he's a prolific writer. We wrote that Christmas special for Guardians in like 48 hours, or the bulk of it. And then he wrote most of Peacemaker, and he's very hands-on.
Yeah. Well, and which, kind of makes you wonder if he came with most of this already done, and that was kind of what swayed going in his favor when they decided on him over, say The Rock or Snyder, maybe that was the case, that he had done a lot of legwork pre this, so which helps, so it's interesting to me that this is the only animated thing that they announced in this setting, and DC is known for all these animated movies they've done over the years that have been huge.
Oh yeah, miles ahead of most Marvel projects, except for, like, I would say Sony's Spider-Man Into the Universe.
Yeah. So this is that's an elephant in the room that really hasn't been touched yet. Does this mean we're done with that and then all those movies as well, if we do animated, will be connected as well?
And James Gunn did say that this isn't all the projects that are going to be in this stage. This is just some of them.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting choice with the ones that he listed out. So a natural place to go next to would be the Amanda Waller series. What are your hopes for that one?
Well, and what he has said is that this will take place between season 1 of Peacemaker and season 2.
Oh,
so for me, I think it'll be interesting to see you know, my only kind of thing with this is, yet again, we used her and Harcourt and Black Adam. So are we just going to say we're forgetting that whole thing? So, it'll be interesting to see where we left her at in season one of Peacemaker, kind of still being out there, but not really knowing where she's at, where we're going with her. It's also been said that the show is supposed to be more along the lines of more spy kind of esque kind of feeling,
Ooh, yeah.
So, that it'll be interesting to see him juggle genres. So,
Um,
you know, it'll, it'll be nice to see, a project within that isn't, your typical superhero fare as well. You know,
and Team Peacemaker is heavily featured in this.
yeah. So,
So, which I'm glad that now it's an official team and I don't have to worry about if it will happen. It's happening. So, um, where should we go to next?
let's talk about Paradise Lost, because
Okay, so that's the prequel to all things Wonder Woman.
yeah, I this was an interesting kind of choice to me. For many years, dating clear back to the Smallville, there was always talk of doing something this direction, and every time it's come forward, it's kind of fallen apart. So it's interesting now, after all these years, that somebody's narrowing in on trying to do a show that is about, you know, pre-birth of Diana, and how, Paradise Island slash Themyscira has kind of become that island and that community that we know later on. And my question will be, how much of do we take pieces from those first two Wonder Woman movies that we've seen,
Mm-hmm.
still in that building or not? So it'll be interesting. And one of the things that I think Peter said is that it's very much kind of Game of Thrones kind of feel of, the inner workings and, the backstabbing.
Oh yeah.
That place of power.
So something I really liked about the Snyder cut was when they focused on the gods of old, as they worded it,
Yeah.
and kind of what was happening in more primitive or ancient times with some of these heroes that are precursors to the ones that we have now. And so this story is very intriguing to me, and I really like the title, Paradise Lost.
Yeah.
And so it instantly provokes some more religious imagery within that itself. And if like Peter and James said, it's kind of Games of Thrones esque. Yeah, sign me up.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's see what else or what next.
Let's go lanterns. Let's go lanterns.
Yes.
So
So
this is what I'm excited about.
this is the one that Dave said I don't know if they should be the focal point, but they have to be in it and they have to get it right. The Green Lanterns. And so
Yes.
whether and we get two lanterns that we're focusing
Two
on.
now, yeah.
And so I'm excited about this one. Tell us about it, Scotty.
So from the way I understand it, it is going to be a procedural cop show like True Detective, focusing on Hal Jordan and John Stewart, Green Lanterns. I'm a huge, I grew up with Hal, but I always have drawn myself to John Stewart. I love John Stewart's story. He was an ex-sniper in the military, and then became a Green Lantern. So, and the other thing that they said, that whatever they are dealing with will play off to the bigger arc of the gods and monsters, this bigger world. So, yes, we're seeing those two are going to be your focal point, but we could see other lanterns as well. We could see Guy Gardner, we could see Kilowog, we could see any number of lanterns throughout that time. So
There are a ton of lanterns. It's
yes,
not just these random two dudes. I mean, they're covering all of space and time and universe and all that jazz.
it'll be interesting to see how far we set Hal at, because has Hal been a Lantern for 15 years, 10 years, or is he fresh as well? Which I kind of doubt that since we have John Stewart as well. So, my question being, does this mean that Sinestro has already left Green Lantern Corps and is out there somewhere? You know,
Mm.
that's a huge, question there of, is Sinestro going to be our big overarching bad? So there's a lot of possibilities, and I agree with Dave that this is huge, and you have to get it right. I don't think there's no in between. I think it really works or it doesn't work.
I like the idea of it being set kind of like a true detective story.
Yeah,
That they're space cops. And I mean, when you view the lanterns, and if you were to describe it to me like that, I'm like, yeah, I can kind of see that. Yeah. And so on paper it works, but it really depends on the actors you get, the storyteller, the director, and so there's a lot of pieces, but if you get the Green Lanterns right, you open up so much of uh the DC comic universe
yeah.
and so many great stories. Um, but that's a piece that's DC hasn't been able to hit in live action. I mean, think about they had Ryan Reynolds,
Yeah.
and it did not work.
And yet again, I get a lot of flack for this one, but there's pieces of that movie I kind of defend and still enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's also going to be the test to how you can piece that story with the rest of this world.
Yes.
I think it'll be the hardest piece to piece together. I think you can tell stories about flying heroes, but a show that takes place in space, you know, that you're not focused on them being on Earth, or maybe they will be, it's gonna be the balance between, are they in space, or are they on Earth, that I think is really gonna be the turning factor on that. I really do. I think it either works or it really doesn't work.
Oh, fingers crossed it works.
I'm excited.
So what do you want to go to next?
Let's go Swamp Thing.
Okay, so this might have been the second project that I'm most excited about, because the way James Gunn described it, that
Yeah,
it's going to feel a lot different than the rest of the universe, but it's still going to tie in, and it's going to be a horror movie,
yeah,
a horror origin story of Swamp Thing.
and supposedly heavily based on the Alan Moore stuff.
Ooh,
Yeah, I'd heard that today. So, I love Alan Moore's Swamp Thing run. He was the one for me that really, yes, he's this big hulking monster, but there's still pieces that humanity left.
yes,
And most of his run was about, finding that humanity within Swamp Thing. And so if you can emulate that and pull that off, I was a huge fan of the show here that happened a few years ago. If you have not seen that show, I highly recommend it. It's
I have
only
not.
it's only one season. It was part of the launch of the DC Infinity app, one of the, like Titans was and Doom Patrol,
Oh yeah,
one of those. The way that show was done was very much that horror base. James Wan was actually involved in that as well,
ooh,
and it was very horror based and very much that Alan Moore. Like, yes, he is this big old monster, but there still is that searching for that humanity, and it's still there. So that's it was interesting to me that Gunn pointed out right away that this one would be the furthest away from everything else that's happening. The one that feels less connected. And I disagree. If you go down the route and start dealing with like the Parliament and that stuff within the Earth, you open up doors yet again, like we talked about with Green Lantern, that you can go anywhere and you can use this character to do anything.
And maybe that's the hope, like as the stages progress, but maybe that origin story feels a little disconnected initially.
Because this could be your way of bringing Constantine in and those magical characters and doing Justice League Dark. We've heard rumor for a long time, so that's huge.
That would be huge. Okay, so we've talked Swamp Thing, we've talked Paradise Lost, we've talked Green Lantern, Amanda Waller, Creature Commandos. What's next?
Let's go Supergirl. Let's see.
Okay, so this is the one that I knew nothing about, but yet the way James Gunn described it, I'm the most intrigued by, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it's interesting to me that we're picking this newer run. This run of her is not that old.
He said it came out within the past year or two. So
yeah. And the writer of the miniseries is heavily involved. So, it's good to see that we, like I said, I'm a big Superman guy, so it's nice to see that we're trying to develop, that Superman family. There is a story to tell about Kara, and it'll be interesting to see how much they vary this take over what the show has done the last few years. That's the biggest thing. I think that may also be an uphill battle. It's the same thing that we seen when Snyder Cut came out, when Justice League came out, that everyone viewed Grant Gustin as Barry Allen. I think we're still so close to the Melissa Benoist TV show. That'll be interesting to see how they try and key this version. The other question I have: are we going to continue? And this was not mentioned, and I've seen brought up quite often. Are we taking the Supergirl from Flash and to this, or is it going to be somebody completely different again?
Oh, I have a feeling it's going to be someone completely different. We haven't used. Yeah, it's hard to say, but I don't know. I feel it's going to be different though. But yes, this story, you have another Kryptonian, but yet she has been left like basically on a chunk of rock, living it up in space all by herself, lone wolfing, hasn't been sent to planet Earth to be brought up by nurturing, loving parents. And so it's going to be different than Superman.
Yeah.
Significantly in that regards. And so this whole theme of gods and monsters, and it, to be honest, I think that you're going to see the circumstances that we're brought up in, the circumstances of events happening currently around these heroes, will kind of shape how they're viewed, whether they're truly being upheld like your stereotypical Superman, that he's a god amongst humans, or if they're going to be recognized more as a monster, even though they might have a lot of good characteristics in them, in which Gunn did talk about, like, it's not going to be black and white. There's not always going to be good and evil. There's going to be some struggle.
Yeah, there's going to be some gray
for these characters. So, as we wind down, we only got a few more, so let's hit them fast and let's hit them hard.
I think
what's next?
Booster Gold. Let's do Booster Gold.
Yeah.
And yet again, it's another TV show. that, could be very, comedy based. He's pretty much stolen time travel technology and come to Earth in present day to be a star and be a hero. So there's a lot that you could play with, especially if you dip into, commentary about where we are at right now with things like Facebook and TikTok and those things. You could have a lot of fun with this show.
Oh yeah, and so the way that James Gunn worded it in the video was that he suffers from imposter syndrome. That he's basically just a regular guy from the future, but when you have future tech, you can become a hero if you
Yeah.
go back in the past.
Oh yeah.
And um, it kind of sounds like to me a little bit of golden age syndrome as well. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I can be amongst these heroes and be recognized as a hero if I'm able to go back and live in this time. And I'll be more revered than I am in the current time I'm living in. And so, uh, depending on who you get to play Booster Gold, this could be a home run.
Yeah.
Kind of like Peacemaker, where it's kind of out of left field for some of the just more casual comic book readers.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But I mean, there's already a cult following of Booster Gold.
And especially if we build up Blue Beetle.
Oh yeah.
That team up would be nice.
I heard some rumblings, some people wanting, I don't think anything official, but that they want Chris Pratt to be Booster Gold.
I have heard that. I don't think that's a bad choice, but I don't know if you could get him to do two TV shows because he's doing the terminal thing at Amazon. So I don't
Oh
know.
yeah, that's going to take
Maybe.
up time.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next?
Let's do Authority.
Okay,
This is what I'm
Authority.
excited about. Authority was the one that really surprised me. This is probably the lesser known out of any of these. Even like creatures, like creature. You have some characters that are recognizable, and like Frankenstein, stuff like that. These characters, even diehard DC characters are not well known to these characters. They start out as a Vertigo imprint that they were heroes who very much the vigilante, the gray area that killing off an enemy, they'll cross that line and they'll go there. There was also the first book to have an openly gay superhero, and gay marriage in it. So it's very interesting to me that you are really taking a gamble on a set of characters that even diehards don't know. But James Gunn did the same thing with Guardians. So I have faith that, he can do it again with these characters because there can be some fun here. And I imagine, yet again, we're going to use these characters in a way that brings in Waller, and Waller becomes that Nick Fury character throughout this project as well.
Oh, Amanda, what won't you get your hands into? So yeah, this announcement of the Authority was my introduction to the Authority. So yeah, we're still learning about this. If you're like me, and if you're like Scotty, you knew it years ago. How dare you, jabronis? Okay, what's next?
Let's hit the big two now. Let's hit Brave and the Bold.
Oh yeah. Okay, so this one I don't think is I don't think it needs to be a home run. Um I think that it should just become a big hit just because the characters that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
I mean, this is now very beloved IP. You got the Waynes.
Yeah.
Multiple.
Yeah. Well, and you're basing it on the Grant Morrison run. So
Yes.
we're going to deal with a Batman who has been Batman for a while, and finds out he has a son with Talia that is 8 to 10 years old. And James Gunn's stress that we're gonna see that Bat family. We're gonna see Dick Grayson. We're gonna see Jason Todd. We're gonna see Tim Drake. We're gonna see Batwoman. That Bat family
All
is,
the bats.
is gonna be kind of a nice addition. Something that we haven't seen in any live action, Batman movie. We've never delved, past, Dick Grayson as Robin. So, that for me is gonna be a fun play. And, if you're adapting that Grant Morrison run, applause, because yet again, you can delve deep and there's a lot of storytelling you can do in the next, 10 years with Batman alone and that side of that Bat family.
Yeah, the thing is that, like, since George Clooney, we've been afraid to touch Robin. Like,
Yeah.
even like Nolan just hinted at uh uh JGL being Robin and taking up that mantle at the end of uh Rises. And so I mean, this definitely opens up a lot of doors, like you said. Grant's run, writing this line of story, amazing.
Yeah.
And so I am excited about it. But like, I think that any Batman thing that you put out there, it's going to be a hit, just because Batman seems to be able to um, survive anything that's going on within the comic book world.
And I think this will be a nice contrast to what we're doing with the Reeves movies. The Batman.
Yes.
This
And
will
which
be
those are Elseworld movies.
yes.
Okay, so we got the last one, which might be the most important project. It and Green Lanterns. It's a toss up.
Yeah.
Superman Legacy. Scotty, break it down.
So it's supposed to be what it sounds like, an adaptation of a 20-something Clark coming to Metropolis, and an adaptation of Grant Morrison, also Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman. Supposedly a new Superman, supposedly has been casted yet. I've heard otherwise, but we'll see. I think it has the most uphill battle. I think, we kind of hit on already, the firing of Henry or letting go of Henry, however you want to come to it. I think whoever you cast, you're going to have to really, really sell it. I think that's going to be the big thing. It's also will be interesting to see how much they adapt of All-Star Superman, because that story is not him coming to Metropolis. He's been Superman for many years. Like, him and Lois are together. She knows he's Superman. So it'll be interesting if they want to jump in that far in, because to me it sounds like he is that 20-something just getting to Metropolis.
Yeah.
So
I know that early on with all the Henry stuff that we want to go younger. And so I would think that you'd have to start off before he like gets really established.
yeah.
And like you said, it's going to be an uphill battle, just because not only was Henry loved by DCEU fans, but we didn't get that much of him.
No.
And there was all this hope and promise that didn't get fulfilled. And so whoever they cast, they have to hit it out of the park, like, instantly.
They've got some big red boots to fill.
Oh yeah. And I know that they've already announced the date for this one. That 2025. I want to say it was like in June, yeah, or
Yeah,
July
July,
11th.
I think. Yeah.
Now, July 11th, 2025, God willing, we're going to have a new Superman movie, which James Gunn's already more than halfway through writing.
And so maybe directing, maybe not. That hasn't been hashed out as well.
So now that we've brushed through all the projects, we're to the end of the podcast, and the end of the podcast. I just want us to spend just a couple minutes reflecting on, are we hopeful for the DCU? I'll let you go first, and I'll close us out.
Okay. I'm very hopeful. I think there's a lot of opportunities here. Something we didn't talk about with Swamp Thing is supposedly hired a director this week already, and James Mangold. That's a big name to attach to, a project this soon. Especially, that's the only other director besides James Gunn that we've even touched on. So I think it's an interesting variety of projects. I think, making Lanterns a TV show or movie may be the better route, that you can spend time with these characters. Whereas, in a 2-hour movie, you're jumping all around from space to Earth, like we talked about. Making Batman already established, I think, you hit the ground running already. That, yet again, we don't fully need an origin story for that character. I don't
I've
think.
already seen Martha die 100 times.
Yeah, everybody who even isn't comic book fan or has never seen these movies know how Batman becomes Batman. Even I would even go as far as to say that, any of the big three, people know those three characters, even outside of the medium of comics, that, it's ingrained us, especially in the last couple of years. So hitting the ground running with those three, if you are what sounds like you're recasting all three, maybe with Gal even, you know, I I think there's a lot of hope here, and I think it's gonna be a lot of, I think, even with these 10 projects being announced, like we talked about, you know, I think there's still going to be a lot of trying to win people back, even people who weren't Snyder fans. I don't think there's ever been a time in a fan base, no matter, if you stood with an actor or with a director, that have come together to really, you know, I don't say condemn, but also, throw shade and be this strong a voice, about a new regime coming in.
Oh yeah, they definitely have advocated really well for Zack Snyder, and they've also have that um at least convicting factor of the new regime that's coming in.
So yeah, I think it really does hinge on, we have, you know, at most we have, would say a little over 2 years before the first project hits, in Superman. So, I think you really have to spend this next time, you know, convincing us that this is where we're going. And maybe Flash will do that. Maybe Flash will set us up bigger than what we even know yet. So I'm very hopeful to see where we go. And at the end of the day, these are the characters that, are like our Greek gods. So, I'm in any
Oh
story
yeah.
you can tell.
Um, so for me, I'm very hopeful. Something that James Gunn said that really stood out to me during this announcement was that he wants um, everyone to feel connected to the story. He wants the storytellers, the directors to have a voice in this. That each one's going to bring their unique flair and feel to this, while still keeping the connectivity and golden threads of the larger universe, and that everything's going to be connected. And so um, this, I think, will either uh, galvanize the fan base, or it will just completely ruin it altogether. That there's it feels like an all or nothing right now,
Yeah, it
just
really does.
because like we've kind of been in the murky waters the past 10 years or whatever. And so like this is now time to sink or swim for DC. And I'm hopeful that James Gunn's the guy that can do it, with the backing and direction of Peter Safran. Um, and who knows what the future could entail. Um, I mean, I would love if there was a way that uh, Snyderverse stuff could be wrapped up, but I don't know if that's possible right now with where Warner Brothers Discovery is
Yeah.
financially, and with trying to separate themselves from uh, just that Warner Brothers HBO Max era, if you will. So, um, but um, that is our podcast this week. This week, we're all in on the DCU. We're hopeful. Tell us what your thoughts are. What projects out of this are you most excited for? Let us know on Facebook, on Twitter, Instagram. I don't know if we're on Instagram, but the other two for sure we are. Like, subscribe to us on whatever podcasts channels, apps you're listening to us on. Leave a positive comment if you like it. Next week, God willing, Dave will be back and will be guiding this ship, like the Captain Kirk he is, and this Jean-Luc Picard will be back in the not captain's chair this time. So anyway, thank you for listening, and we will see you all next week with a new pod over who knows what. Have a great week, everyone.